Hello, 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 and welcome to another episode of the Blue Oval Podcast. I am Ben Weiss, and joining me, as always, Garrett Zatlin. How's it going, man?
Ben, thank you for your flexibility today. Ben was like, "Can we do the podcast at 3:30? It's a Sunday. It's November 12th." And I was like, "Ben, I love you, but I love the Steelers more," which is tough given how they've performed over the last couple of years. And thankfully, they pulled it out. They're the worst 6-3 team in NFL history, but I appreciate your flexibility to let me just stress out for about 3 hours.
Absolutely, yeah. I had it on kind of in the background, and it was kind of fun. I was watching the last few minutes, and it came down to the wire. I have a week off from stress with the Eagles on a bye, so it's nice.
Yeah, the difference is that you guys are like actually good. So
Yes.
there's just a little bit of different stress level there. But speaking of other things that are really good, +2 on Apple, 81. Thank you. That was great. We got +3 on Spotify. Got a very, very kind comment, rating and review, I guess, on Apple saying that their daughter went through the recruiting process last year, that they're subscribed. Thank you to the site. They're listening, and that her team just qualified, I guess, for nationals, or at least they ran very well, and said that we're a little bit more researched than maybe some others. So I appreciate that. That was a very kind and very thoughtful message. So thank you for doing so.
Absolutely, yeah. I love the line of had an aha moment on how well researched this is compared to some other podcasts, which is, hey, we don't live and breathe this sport to not be well prepared, right? I mean, this is why we do it.
It would be really bad if we lived blood, sweat, tears, everything for the sport, and we were bad.
Yes.
It would be very awkward. So, but nonetheless, appreciate it. Thank you so much. Ben, we have quite the episode today.
We do.
I think we should preface, there's a good chance you will not be on the podcast next week because, you're an adult and a family man and you just have other obligations coming up next week. So post-nationals, immediately after, you won't be available for that episode. I'll try to find someone in the meantime. Yep. But you are here. We're going to react to the regional results today, just some surprises. And then we're going to preview the NCAA D1 cross-country championships. Sound good?
Yes. It sounds good. And yeah, maybe I have to dust off my Twitter fingers because I don't think I've tweeted for a while, and have some live reactions to the national meet just so I can fire off my thoughts. Or like when I was off for a little bit last time, I just came back and had a bunch of hot takes after coming back from Europe. I think we'll probably have to do something like that as well.
Yeah, no, and we'll certainly find time to fit that all in. But don't worry, we'll find someone, and we'll make it happen. So, Ben, kick us off today with the regional results that just came in.
Let's talk about regionals. Obviously, one of the most exciting days of the year, I think, for us to see all the results come in from all 9 regions to try to figure out what that means for other teams across the country. And boy, we saw, we talked about some of these scenarios possibly happening, but there were some really, really unexpected results that we could not have even imagined. With that said, I think we want to talk about some of the surprise qualifiers and some of the surprising teams that did not qualify for the national meet. We'll get to your teams who did qualify when we talk about the national preview. But with that said, let's start with the Boston College women, who put together a fantastic race. We knew they had a chance at making nationals. I think we both said it was like a 50-50 kind of chance for them, but they just went out and were like, we're not even going to really rely on a coal-loss scenario. We're just going to get one of those automatic qualifying spots, finishing second with 109 points, only 11 points behind Syracuse, beating Providence and Harvard. Just a fantastic race and just a true sign of the direction that this program is going.
They weren't supposed to be this good this year. They just weren't. They were 16th at the Northeastern regional meet last year.
That is so wild.
They're not supposed to be this good. And listen, don't get me wrong. I saw that, they picked up Emma Tavella during the offseason as a transfer. Really nice pickup. Same thing with Lily Flynn from Stanford. But those were not women where I was like, oh, well, they're going to carry the scoring and they're going to get this team to the national meet. I thought, okay, maybe Tavella will be pretty solid, but Flynn and Tavella have been so focal and have been such great valuable scorers, and they've been the reason where I'm like, man, they were never this good on the grass during their time in the Pac-12. And so to see Pete Watson actually bring those women in, develop them to their full potential, or at least close to their full potential, and then also have another supporting cast around them be as good as consistent as they've been. Like I said, they were not supposed to be this good.
You could see the signs of this program with Catherine Mitchell on the track and her success.
Mm-hmm.
But to translate that from one superstar in a middle distance event to a full team on the distance side in cross country is just very, very impressive. So, I mean, these results, having 4 teams qualify on the women's side for the, or no, 3, sorry. Did Harvard, am I
4.
speaking?
4.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry. I had a flash of doubt there. 4 teams qualifying in the Northeast region really kind of shook things up. We expected 2, obviously 2, probably 3, but to get 4, that took some slots from some other teams, and we'll get to them in a minute. But the other team that I wanted to mention on the women's side, not necessarily a huge surprise, but we weren't sure about who was going to take that second South Central spot with Texas not running very well on the women's side. Texas A&M comes up clutch with a great run to finish second.
Great run. I think it's very easy to just dismiss the South Central for what it is, but Texas A&M, like Tulane's a good team. Tulane's a very good team.
And they beat them,
in fact,
like by a significant
they beat them
margin.
soundly. Yeah, I mean, like Texas A&M was clearly the second best team. LSU was actually third, and LSU has quietly been like
Michaela Rose, 18th, Rangel Rachels, 24th. Like some of these women, more like middle distance, looking really good in cross country too.
Yeah. I mean, that was a nice run for LSU.
Yeah.
But Texas A&M, their top 3 was so compact. You know, they had Madison Brown, they had Maddie Livingston, and they had Kennedy Fontenot, if I'm saying that right. They went 9-11-14, and when you do that in this kind of field, that's going to be pretty impactful. Their bottom 2 were 27th, 29th, at least from the scoring perspective. Let me take a look. They were 30th and 32nd, excuse me. So. Still, I mean, that's in this kind of field where every other team like Tulane and LSU were way more spread out and more sporadic. Really impressive stuff. Madison Brown has been huge, and she's actually a transfer from Dallas Baptist, and she was a great D2 runner during her time over there. And I kind of forgot that she had transferred there until I saw her. I'm like, oh, yeah, nice. And so it's one of those things where you look back and you don't realize the magnitude of a transfer until she actually made it.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, it's just exciting to see like a team that has not qualified for nationals and I don't know how long on the women's side qualify, and we have like a new team to watch at NCAAs. I always think that's super exciting, and hopefully this is momentum that they can continue to build, and we can have a more competitive South Central in years going forward. I think we both feel like Texas will be back next year and a lot stronger. So hopefully Texas A&M can continue to be a strong contender for that second spot. But let's go and switch to the men's side, and let's start in the Mountain region where we saw Montana State. I think we had talked about, hey, like there's scenarios where if they just can beat one of those top 5 teams, they could get they more than likely will get that push scenario. We just didn't think it was all that likely that they would be able to beat one of those teams, but sure enough, they did. Beating Colorado to finish 5th. And I mean, you can't help but feel just, I think, so happy for this program and the way that they've developed over the last few years to be truly a national caliber team. But they lost a lot last year, and they come back and just are able to put enough together. Had actually like 6 guys who were very, very strong. Like this wasn't a team that just was hanging on for dear life. They put it together just a very, very solid race.
Yeah, real quick, I just want to quickly go back to Texas A&M.
Sure.
First time for that their women's team qualified in 23 years.
Wow.
Second time ever.
That's awesome.
In program history. So super cool. Shout out to them. Montana State. Yeah, when you saw them, I think they finished, 9th at Joe Piani I'm trying to go back and double check. They were finished like 8th or 9th, and it was bad. And I want to know, at that point, what percent chance would you have given them to qualify for the national meet? They were 9th. So they were behind Notre Dame, Florida State, Alabama, NC State, Michigan State, Charlotte, Akron, and Furman.
Like a 3% chance, like a 5% chance.
Yeah.
Like, yeah. I mean, like, obviously they're in a region where it's, again, they had other teams that could push them in if for whatever reason one of them had a bad day, but that was like the only scenario. And for them to put it together, and you look at these names like in their top group. I mean, we've always liked Ben Perrin, Rob McManus, Levi Taylor, good steeplechasers. Owen Smith really stepping up this year, 28th place finish. He was their number 3. Yep. Matthew Rickman, solid scorer, consistently number 2. Like, this isn't like a super big fluke when you look at the names. It's just for them to put it together all right now after just not having a great start to the beginning of the year, I think is very, very impressive.
Yeah, and not only that, but like, who would have thought that, going into this year, that's Colorado pushing them in. Yeah. And they beat Colorado soundly.
Yes. They were closer to Air Force than they were to Colorado.
Yeah. And, like Montana State had a nice rebound race at pre-nationals, and they had shown some promise. But, man, I'm kind of looking at Colorado. I'm like, ooh.
What do we like? How can we predict them at nationals? Like, when I'm looking at my predictions, I'm like, I don't know. Like, you could throw a dart anywhere, and I really don't know what we can expect from this team. Like, you look at it, like, Paul Stafford has been a very solid for them all year, but and Vansel's been good, but you just don't know what you're getting from a lot of the rest of that roster.
Like, and I don't know, because like you think about like where they are in our rankings, and you have to subscribe to find out. But it's like, and this is before the update even happens. So right. If you're seeing this on Wednesday and you already know the new update, we don't even know where they're going to be placed yet. But
I truly don't know. Like, that's going to be a very hard discussion.
Like, I don't even know where that's going to be. So actually, you and I need to talk about that after. Yeah. But regardless, great race by Montana State. Everything else, though, pretty much chalk.
Yes, absolutely. All right, let's go to the Southeast then on the men's side, where we saw NC State surprise qualification. I mean, I think I even said something along the lines of when like we were talking just like before podcast last week of being like, yeah, I really just don't think NC State has it this year. I don't think they're going to be able to do it. They finished 3rd behind North Carolina and Eastern Kentucky. They beat Wake Forest. They beat Virginia, which was key for them to be able to be pushed in. And I mean, it was again, not a just like by just a hair. They really qualified, beating both those teams by over 30 points. Super impressive runs from all their guys. And again, you look at the back end is a little bit surprising at how well they ran, but you look at their top 2, Hannes Berger, Brett Gardner, like guys that you could have predicted at one point would finish around that area. We knew they had some talent, but for their back end to come in and finish as well as they did, that was super unexpected.
Yeah, and this is a team that, like, yeah, they were 4th at Joe Piani, and they weren't nearly as bad as Montana State was. Yeah. But that performance was still not great for them, and they were far worse throughout the rest of the season. I mean, it was bad for them. Like, you figure, go to Nuttycombe, for instance. They were what? They were back in 31st place.
Yeah, they were
which
awful.
Is an ugly result. And then ACC Championships, they were down in 8th place. I mean, like, there was no sign. There was no, like, recent momentum. Like, at least Montana State had like a little something, right? But no, I mean, that was really impressive. Hannes Berger does this thing where he's just like, don't worry, I've got you, I'm coming. And then he just, 10K, he's just a stud. Yeah. He's a completely different guy. He kills it in the postseason every time. Like, he's not going to be like a superstar All-American, but he's going to be a lead scorer like you just saw. And then Brett Gardner to step up. Dan McGooey's been probably one of the few lone bright spots of this team this year. Toby Golter steps up and actually produces the value that he was initially brought in for. And this is all with Ian Harrison not having his best season.
Yeah.
So wildly clutch. Like the fact that they could have lost to Wake Forest and still been pushed in by Virginia, I think just goes to show how convincing this result was for them.
Absolutely. And you mentioned Wake Forest, really good run for them. I mean, if they can be fully healthy like next week and have everybody, they could be dangerous. And honestly, I don't think Virginia should be that upset. I mean, Gary Martin having a rare off day this year, and they had 3 at least that you feel pretty good about. I mean, I think they're starting to trend in the right direction. Like, they're going to be on their home course next week. Be interesting to see what they can do as well.
Yeah. I'm just not looking that deep into this Virginia result.
Yeah.
I'm just not. Just for me, I'm just like, you know what? I think they probably did the math. They're probably like, we're good. And I will say though, they cut it pretty close.
A lot closer than they needed to.
Charlotte was back at 159 points and Virginia scored 136. If Charlotte beats Virginia, the problem is that NC State's already pushed in, and you can't push in more than one team in a region.
Oh, I don't think I knew that. Oh,
yeah,
man.
you can't push in more than one team in a region, and so you're then like I think they're done. Like I think they're out.
Yeah,
basically.
Yeah.
And they basically saved themselves by 23 points.
Wow. Interesting. Yeah. All right, let's go and wrap up the surprise qualifying teams with the Portland and Gonzaga Men out of the West Regional. We knew that the West Region on the men's side was going to be crazy. We really didn't know what to expect. We felt good about California Baptist. We felt good as you can about this Stanford team. But we weren't sure about Oregon or Washington. We really kind of had Boise State like a little bit on the radar and Gonzaga a little bit on the radar. Portland, we really just did not. I don't even think we mentioned them last podcast, but it is Gonzaga who takes that second auto qualifying spot behind Stanford. And then Portland beating California Baptist by a tiebreaker, both scoring 125 points. They come out on top of that tiebreaker to finish third, and both of those teams qualify. And we'll get to we'll probably talk about the teams who surprisingly did not qualify in this region, but staying on the positive side, just a fantastic race by both of these programs. Portland, just, you never know what you're going to get at regionals. After a huge disappointment to not qualify, they completely flipped the script this year.
Yeah, it's funny. Like Gonzaga was really good, but they lost so much firepower from last year.
Yeah,
and they bring in Drew College, who's Collage. Yeah, he was a D2 All-American from Michigan Tech. I was like, okay, he'll be a decent scorer. He'll contribute, but I didn't expect him to finish 12th. Like finishing 12th is it's the race of his life, and it's a massive performance. But frankly, they didn't really even need him to be that good. Like they were convincingly the second best team in the field. They were, 27 points ahead of Portland. What I want to make something interesting here though, is that if Washington somehow would have gotten that second auto and Gonzaga gets bumped down, I don't know what happens there. And I wonder what happens in that scenario.
So it would have gone if it was Stanford, Washington, Gonzaga, Portland. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, because then does Gonzaga block from a push?
I think Gonzaga had points. Did they not?
I think they did. Yeah. I just wanted to see by how much. So they would have gotten in, but Portland would have kept CBU out.
Oh, so both of the. Oh, wow, interesting.
Which is
odd. I feel like CBU would have pushed them in.
Yeah, which is what I'm surprised about. Now, granted, just so everyone knows, the qualifiers are out. We were 100% accurate. Bo's website, xequals.com, were 100% correct. But yeah, that's what I'm trying to figure out is what happened. Like, how do they actually get in? And it's CPU because I have no idea.
And it's funny because CBU, I think, was the team that we felt like most confident about and most sure about in this region, and they were like right on the hair. They obviously tie with Portland, but they were only 4 points ahead of Washington. If they lose to Washington and they're fifth, they certainly do not make it.
I'm so confused. I don't know how that happened. Okay, I'll talk to Bo after that.
Yeah, I gotta believe that they would have been able to push in.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm probably just missing something that, like, as a complete caveat. But everything else, all of our other projections have been 100% correct. So regardless, and then Portland, they were so bad this year. I mean, they were bad. I mean, and again, it's not that they were not talented, but they got hit with injury bug and illnesses, like lasting illnesses. And, then guys just had an off day here or there. And when that happens, you just can't rally. Like 30th at Nuttycombe was poor. And then just to come through, it just goes to show that, yes, with the exception of last year, the regional meet is like Portland's meet. This is Portland's race. And I would like to also point out this in the West region. John Gold of Let's Run actually pointed this out on Twitter or X, whatever.
It's wild.
What a crazy scenario this is. So Portland and California Baptist each tied with 125 points each for third place. Portland wins the tiebreaker to finish third. And because they finished third, California Baptist then pushes them in. The catch, however, is that Portland's, I believe, second scorer, or
Daniel
third scorer, Jonah Budrski,
yes, yeah. Mm-hmm.
ran 29:41.2, and the guy below him ran 29:41.2. Basically, he beat the guy behind him by less than 1/10 of a second. And
that's the difference.
Jamar Diestel had beat him by 0.09 or more, or, whatever it is, or makes up the gap, then Portland doesn't go to the national meet. So basically less than 1/10 of a second separated them from going to the national meet.
Yeah, absolutely wild. And I mean, if you're California Baptist too, they were right on the edge with Washington. Like, you start flipping a few of these, like if like Distel was like we're saying, just less than 1/10 of a second behind Badurski. If they get that point, then all of a sudden they're 1 point close. Like they were just maybe a second or so of things changing to qualifying, or possibly, well, I guess neither. They still wouldn't have qualified, but CBU certainly would not have qualified in that scenario. If Washington finished fourth, is there only 2 teams out of the West?
Let's find out.
And just while you're looking that up,
two at-large teams, because Washington, I think, pushes Portland.
Oh, they are able to push them in. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that's interesting. But yeah, I mean, I really am not like that down on Washington's performances. I think Hauser had a bad day, but you look, I mean, they have freshmen running in the top 25. I mean, Nathan Green was 17th, a little worse than maybe you would expect. Wascom was 47th, I think. Like, they just, most years this is probably enough, but it just didn't work out.
Yeah, but I mean, like, and the thing with Washington is that, like, they kind of showed us this.
Yeah.
Like, this was like, yeah, when I said time and time again, I was like, hey, there's going to be teams that miss out majorly in the West region. Like, there's no Colvas points, like, really there for Washington. They had a couple, but then they had to be in a good enough position.
Yeah.
As well as hope that other things went well. And you just look, they were just never that strong this season. And the unfortunate part is that Luke Hauser just had a tough day.
And if he doesn't, they qualify, like that, and that's the bummer. So yeah, we're transitioning to the teams that we are surprised that did not qualify, and there's no better spot to start than in this West Regional, because as we're mentioning, Washington was just a normal Luke Hauser day away from qualifying, but Oregon was not one thing away. They end up finishing 7th. They really needed to beat one of CBU, Stanford, Washington. Like, they needed some help because they had no Colas points coming in, really, and they just it caps just an incredibly underwhelming season for them as a whole.
Quickly, just going back to the Gonzaga scenario. Remember when I said, like, why does CBU not push in Portland?
Right.
It's because by the time Gonzaga gets
selected,
there's only one spot remaining, and therefore you can't push in. CBU can't push in, and that's why. So, anyways,
fascinating.
Yeah, and the worst part of all of this is that, like, Washington, we're like, well, they were just like one good Luke Hauser day away. It's like, he's the only guy that we should be praising. Like, he was the only
great all year.
Yeah, I mean, he was the guy. Nathan Green was actually good when he did race, but he ran 2 races. I still look at this and being like, man, like, he could have used way more help. And it's just one of those things where in the West region, in the Pac-12, like, things are down. And in terms of like what Oregon did, what was the plan? What?
I don't, and the thing is, they ran a lot of, like, the only guy they really didn't run this year was Beerbaum, and like it's not like, well, yeah, but they ran Sturry, didn't they, at the beginning of the year?
Unattached. Okay.
It was just, I was like, well, is this like a full transition year where you're just redshirting everybody? Are you going for it? It just seems like they picked like this middle road, which ultimately didn't gain you at really anything all year.
Yeah, because like if I'm Oregon, I'm looking at the what is it, Joe Piani? I'm looking at Virginia Invitational. I'm looking at whatever, and I'm like, oh, those are bad races from Stanford, Colorado, and Washington. I'm like, how comfortable am I thinking that I can get pushed in, or that I can, like, if something happens that we don't get an auto, right? Like, I imagine that the mentality of this for not racing during the season, and therefore not having a lot of Colas points was, well, we're just going to get the auto, we're going to get pushed in. And
you have to be running well to do that, though.
and that's the thing. I'm just like, okay, well, the Pac-12 is not even that great, and not this year at least.
Yeah.
And then at the end of the day, it didn't matter. It just didn't matter. Like, they were completely out of contention anyways. So, listen, I'm just a guy behind a mic, a guy behind the computer. I'm not going to question Jerry Schumacher of all people in this sport. Like, I'm not qualified enough to do that. But I am just kind of curious, because I want to give this team the benefit of the doubt, and they're going to be really good in the future.
Yeah. I
just don't know what the plan was, and I'm still kind of left scratching my head like, that was odd. So,
yeah. On the bright side, Elliott Cook was just straight up good this year.
Good.
Yeah. I mean, he finished 10th this past weekend. I mean, he was really the biggest bright spot, but they just, they have talent from their last like recruiting class or two, like bring in Sturry, like they have the talent on the roster. It's just weird to see it not cultivate as quickly or even just like show any sign of progress this year. Is just very upsetting.
Yeah. Now, excuse me, that said, Berenbaum is still, still in the depths of the roster. Sturry is still there. I mean, this roster is crazy young, and they still have really good guys. Like, Cook still has some eligibility, and he's been running really well. So the future is I'm still just as high on them now as I was at the beginning of the season.
Yeah. I mean, I think I'm a little concerned. Like, I don't know. I think they still have the potential. I just maybe have a little bit more questions. I would like to see something at least during this track season. And
I just don't think that this lineup is going to be what we see in 2 or 3 years.
No. I mean, maybe 2 or 3 of these guys are remaining. If that many still in a few years. Yeah. I mean, you still would bank on Oregon figuring it out under Schumacher. Like, that seems to be a pretty safe bet in 3 years that they'll have put together something quite good.
Yeah. In terms of others, here's where the Colas critics are going to come in, and I can't help but agree with them. Alabama Men finished 3rd in the South region, and they fall out of national qualifying. And it's tough because I think it's clear that they were better than NC State. They were better than Portland this year.
Yep.
And so I'm like, well, wait. And even Montana State, truthfully. And I'm like, well, wait. Those to Georgetown also. Like, I'm going to throw Georgetown in there too. But I'm looking at these teams. I'm like, those teams are going in, but Alabama's not? And the problem with this is that with Alabama's schedule is that when you look at where they went to Joe Piatti, which is a good meet, but the teams that they beat weren't going to yield any Colas points, right?
Yeah.
And they did beat NC State, and they did beat Montana State. The problem is that those teams were pushed in, so therefore they couldn't get the point. You don't give a point away if you're a pushed-in team. So that's 2 lost points, and that's just a brutal way to kind of miss out. So
what do you think about that rule? Because like I think like obviously they make it if that isn't the case.
Well, I think what the NCAA is trying to do is say, hey, we don't want to reward you just because another team got lucky and had a good day, and you beat them and they're truthfully not even that good.
Yeah.
And again, I'm not trying to bag on the pushed in teams here, but generally speaking, that's kind of what I'm saying. Whereas like I imagine that's the mentality, and I can kind of see it makes sense. But also like if you beat them, you beat them, and if you beat them, then why would you not give them the point? So I agree. I've always wondered, like, philosophically, does that make sense?
Yeah, I think I agree with you. I get the intention, but at the end of the day, those teams are making it to nationals, and like the points are based off or like from a larger view of everything, it's based off of the teams that you beat that make nationals. Like it seems like an odd thing, an odd technicality, but I mean, really, it's not as if Alabama really ran poorly. I mean, Kip saying could have maybe been a little bit higher, but I mean, even he didn't have a bad day. The back end wasn't bad. It was just Florida State had a great day. Like 5 in the top 25. They were very, very good. And Tennessee again was very good as well. Like both teams had very good days, and it was just unfortunate that Alabama just in most years they're scoring 86 points and having the schedule they did, you're gonna make it. It's just a little bit unlucky.
Yeah, it is unlucky. So, okay, are we good on the men's side? Do we have any more on the women?
On the women's side, I think it is North Carolina Men is our one surprise team that did not qualify. Again, we had talked about them last. No, yeah, sorry. Who was I missing?
Well, you said North Carolina Men.
Oh, sorry, North Carolina Women. Yes, of course.
And then the other one would be Oregon State Women.
Oregon State, yes, absolutely. So North Carolina, we talked about. We knew that this was a possibility. They were a little bit on the fringe. But ultimately, they finished 5th place and really don't even give themselves a chance in the Colas scenarios. They needed to finish at least 4th. And it just caps a very strange season because this is a team where you look at the talent and it just doesn't line up. You had a lot of people that weren't, a lot of their top names who weren't running at this regional meet. But again, it's just caps a season where just so underwhelming compared to where we thought they were at the beginning of the year as a true like podium threat I think at some point.
Yeah, I don't know what happened. I mean, the team is so talented. Like they're so talented, and I just don't know what kind of happened there. So I can only shrug my shoulders. I don't even have like a good like. I think it's probably must have been something like couple women got injured or there was illness or just a bad season or whatever. And I think it was just probably, if I'm guessing, and that's all it is, speculation and guessing, they just had a bunch of unlucky moments come all together at once. And I don't know how else, because the talent is there. It's undeniable. I think they are naturally more talented than probably half of the NCAA field when everyone's at their best.
Yeah. Yeah. I completely agree. The other team in the West Regional, Oregon State Women, I mean, they were, I think, so much better all year than we expected. That their depth was impressive. You had Mitchell and Featherstone Hall, like they always do, leading the way, and they were great this week. Like they first and third really can't ask much more from them, but it was the rest of the lineup scoring 228 points when you're scoring 3 through 2 is just almost hard to do, and just a very frustrating end for them as they finish their season early.
Yeah, it's just a bad day. It's one bad day, and that's all it is. Like they really are.
They're the Portland Men of like last year, where it's like,
yeah,
they were clearly one of the top 25 teams this year, and just unfortunately their worst day came at the time they needed it the most.
Yeah, and they didn't even need like everyone.
Could have been fifth, right?
Yeah, they could have been fifth, and they still could have gotten in. Like they needed someone to step up and cut off like 60 points and finish like in the like top 30 somewhere, which is very reasonable. And it just didn't happen. And it just stinks because this is a really good team. I thought Coach Louis Quintana did it perfect with the transfer portal in terms of adding support pieces. He knew when to utilize the firepower of Kaylee Mitchell and Featherston Hall and leverage that. And they just had a bad day. It just happens. And so that stinks.
Absolutely. All right. Anything else on the regional meet before we head to NCAA preview?
Let's go to the NCAA preview.
All right. So this weekend we have NCAA championships coming up. We just went through some of the surprise teams that will be there and those that will not. But let's turn our focus to the team title race. And I think when you look at it on the men and women's side, you have, I think, a clear favorite. The same school, I think, for both. And then you have strong contenders that you wouldn't be stunned to see win. I think it's rare when you see championships where there is that favorite, but they're not an overwhelming favorite like we've had in years past. Let's start on the men's side. NAU has done everything you could possibly ask them to do, really. They've looked great. Aaron Loss Harris has seamlessly transitioned into that team. Kang Neok was fantastic this past week at Regions. I think he was fifth at the Mountain Regional, just a really, really good performance. And they look like they are loaded. It's going to take an overwhelming performance, I think, from Oklahoma State, who looks like they have the firepower to do it. When Alex Mayer is your fifth guy, you have potential. But it's going to take a lot. It's going to take a perfect day like it did last year. And even a perfect day from Oklahoma State last year wasn't enough. So it'll be interesting to see if it is this year.
Took the words right out of my mouth. I think really what it comes down to is how good is Brian Masau and Dennis Kipnick. I'm going to butcher that name a lot. Sorry. They went 1-2 and in reverse order. Those guys are the big names. And the Masau I'm less worried about, but Kipnick is the guy who was 14th, I want to say, at Big 12s. And that's fine, but that's not where he needs to be. He needs to be firing on all cylinders. And I'm just not taking a look at this Midwest regional meet. Like, I'm just not putting that much emphasis on it. I think those two are the guys that like kind of really need to be home run hitters. And if they are, I do think that they can win. I just don't know. The Big 12 performance kind of just doesn't make me halt. It kind of just makes me pause briefly and be like,
sure.
So that's all I got.
Yeah, I mean, Kim Nagenich, Masaudi, and Alex Mayer, you feel great. Not great, but they have the firepower through four, and then you just need someone else to step up.
Well, I think they have the firepower with Victor Shisama as long as he's actually going to run at his best.
Well, and that was kind of my next point of being like, who is that? Like, if you can get someone to really step up for that fifth spot. Adiso Guadia was really good at Midwest Regional. He was fifth. We've seen Will Muirhead be good at Big 12s. Alex Stitz there. But really the guy I think we're both looking at is Shitsama. Like, if he can be who he's always been at NCAAs, they have a very, very good shot. Yeah.
The 45th at Big 12s was like, I think, a clear fluke.
Yes.
And he's a 3-time All-American, I want to say. I'm not worried about him. Just because he always comes up. It's just a matter of where if assuming he is like a 4th-time All-American on the grass, where in that lineup is he?
Yeah.
And I think that's ultimately the determinant of whether or not Oklahoma State wins a title. So.
Is this NAU's deepest team that they've had in like this last run?
That's a great question.
Because they had 7 in the top 22 at regionals. Again, it's regionals. They're not necessarily going full out, but a lot of these teams around them are, and they had 7 in the top 22. I mean, they've had years where like a guy like Ryan Raff is like their 7th guy who has like All-American potential. Like they've had years where they've had a lot of guys, but you feel a little bit more confident, I feel like, in a lot of these guys this year.
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly, I think this is definitely the strongest their depth has ever been. I don't know if this is the deepest.
Sure.
Does that make sense?
Yes, I think that's a better way of saying it.
Yeah, I think this is the strongest that their depth has ever been. So.
Yeah. Yep. And I mean, they still got that firepower of Young and Bosley up front, and I would be stunned if we didn't see 5 All-Americans at least from NAU, and probably 6. So, all right, let's switch to the women's side, and again, we'll stay with NAU. I think NAU is deservedly the favorite. They dominated the regional meet while sitting. What was it? Rice and Stearns and Kira Moore, and they didn't skip a beat. Graceland Larkin has been great. Ruby Smee's there. Macy great. Like Ali Upshaw has been awesome this year. Like they just are so strong. I mean, through like 7 or 8 runners. NC State doesn't have the firepower, or maybe as much firepower as we thought they could, with Tenissima looking banged up. Bush is starting to come back into form, it looks like, but it just doesn't look like they have the margin for error, and they quite frankly just don't have the momentum that NAU does this year. And I think NAU is, again, deservedly the favorite. It wouldn't shock either of us to see NC State when you got Tui and Camille possibly going 1-3 or 1-4, like, and then if they can get someone to step up in a big way like they did last year, all of a sudden they're NCAA title winners again.
Yeah, it's the second DNF by Tenissima.
Yeah, I don't think you can rely on her.
Yeah, it's such a it's a tough.
And I was saying like that. I'm saying that as someone last week who was like, she made it through most of the race. It was her first race back. Like I could see. I wish they would have just rested her. I do not know why she ran this race. Like I get like maybe confidence going into nationals, but like they're just. You don't need, like, just let her have some workouts, get healthy, and be ready to go all out at nationals. They didn't need her to run this week.
Yeah, I mean, again, Lori Hennis is another one of those coaches who I'm never going to question. And I also don't even know like what the status of Tenissima truly is. Like, I imagine that if she's fit enough to toe the line, then she's probably, or healthy enough to toe the line, then she's probably fit enough to at least be some kind of contributor as well. I think I will say that the biggest development though here is Sam Bush in 6th place. Like seeing her slowly rally back. You know, she was not great during the regular season, 11th during ACCs, now 6th at the Southeast, and you're like, man, like they really need Tenissima. But if Bush is now getting back into like, you know, peaking into top All-American form, then you have Camille and Tui and Bush and Stevens, and how I'm not totally against Grace Hartman being an All-American. I don't think that's out of the question.
Or, I mean, Gianna Corzo. Like, I mean, she's shown flashes in the track too. Yeah, I mean, again, they have, like, NAU's run better all year. But you line them up, like, talent-wise, and there really isn't that much difference. Like, you feel good about if Bush is back, and maybe she's not all the way back, but she's 90% of what she can be. You feel pretty good through 4 runners. I mean, Stevens obviously is young, and you don't know exactly how she's going to react at nationals, but she's been running really great all year. And so if you can stack those 4 up, and they just have so many other possibilities to fill in and be a really good 5th runner. I mean, again, last year was kind of the same exact thing, where it was Novato Moreno who stepped up in a
Yeah.
huge way.
Mm-hmm.
They just need someone to have maybe one of those days, and they really could be right there. But it's going to. I feel like, I don't know how you feel, but it almost seems like NAU is going to have to slip up a little bit for anybody to catch them. If they run like they've been running, I just don't think there's really anything anybody can do.
And that's the case. Like, you know, the difference between this year and last year is that NC State, their margin of error is comparatively,
yeah,
was huge last year. Like Moreno could have fallen back 30 spots, I think, and they still could have won or something like that. Whereas this year, it's like, no, that you actually have to have everyone run perfectly, all on the same day. And I don't know if, like, I mean, I don't think that's guaranteed to happen with NC State. Whereas NAU, it's like, I feel like they could field 9 women, and I feel pretty good about all of them, you know? So
they could run their regional squad and you would be like, hey, like they could be competitive. Like, that's just where they're at right now. And they can put 7 women on the line and be like, it really doesn't matter who's in that top 5. Like, we feel good about any of them being in there. Like, I mean, with some exceptions, maybe like Stearns, but really they just seem almost interchangeable through 7.
And I will say this, though. I mean, I think there's a factor of inexperience. Like, first off, Kira Moore has not run since she was a top 50 name in her rankings at some point. She hasn't run since Nuttycombe, which isn't great. And then they have other women like Allie Upshaw, who, again, has been great this season. She's still pretty new to this level, though. She's pretty, generally speaking, like, this is like a new level for her. And so there's like other moments like that where kind of the same thing could be said about Maisie Grice, who's like a back end runner, maybe Maggie Congdon as well. And don't get me wrong, they've all had great performances in the past, specifically on the track, but at cross country and at this level, it's a little bit new. So that's the only thing where I could think like maybe like put a hole in their argument. Otherwise, I agree. I think NAU just has, I mean, they have an army of top scorers.
It really is amazing. All right, let's go and let's stay on the women's side and let's talk about individual title favorites. Obviously, I think we both feel like Caitlin Toohey is that top favorite, but Parker Valby has beaten her in their only head-to-head matchup. Are you still, maybe I'm putting words in your mouth, do you still feel like Toohey is that top favorite?
I don't. I don't think, all things considered, that we can say that she's the clear defined favorite. I think she's a co-favorite. I think it's a pretty much even split, especially because what Valby did to Doris Lemmengal
that
twice.
Was amazing.
I'm not ready to make my pick yet, and that's why we have our predictions, which are coming onto the site later this week. But man, it's tight, and like I think Valby has literally done everything to deserve to be in that favorite 100%. Conversation, and so I would say that they're co-favorites.
Okay, yeah, it'll be. I mean, we're assuming that Valby's going to run the way she always does, and it'll just be interesting to see if she can execute or if Toohey just doesn't have the ability to catch up the way she has in years past. I mean, it's going to be super competitive. Do you think Lemmengal is the clear cut number 3? Do we feel like Camille or someone else is that third, maybe the other person that realistically could at least hang with one of them, the two of them for a while?
I think Lemmengal, is probably the next best option there. Her or Stearns, just because Lemmengal soundly defeated Camille earlier this season.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I think Lemmengal and probably Stearns are probably my next best 2 bets, I guess you could say. Yeah, maybe, I mean, throw in Camille at this point. Like, they're probably, different.
Yeah, I mean, Camille always just shows up at nationals and puts together a great race. This is what she does. She always seems to peak very well at this time. But yeah, I think it's a two horse race, and it's going to be Like we said this going into last year, but I feel like it's even tighter than it was last year.
Yeah, yeah. Oh man, I just sincerely don't know which way I'm leaning yet. I think I have an idea, but that could change as soon as we get off this podcast.
All right, let's go to the men's side. And the men's side, boy,
How many?
Oh yeah, that's what I was actually just going through. I'm going through our individual rankings right now, just so I can count. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I think it's 5.
All right, you think it's 5? All right, then
Who do you think? Who are those 5?
I think you're thinking Blanks, Young, Kaleda, Bosley, and Masau. I think you think it's Masau.
No, I think Robinson.
Okay, I wasn't sure. I wasn't sure how you felt.
I still feel really good about Robinson. Yeah, I'm not ready to, but I mean, you could put Masau in there. Are you 5 or 6?
I might be 7.
Whoa! All right, who's the 7th?
I think it's Alex Mayer.
Mayer, okay.
I mean, I don't think he's really done anything. Like,
no, he's been great.
He's been awesome. He was just as good as last year. Is Blanks the consensus favorite?
You see, I feel like Bosley would have been mine, but he just hasn't done anything. And Robinson was the other guy that I was coming into the year with. I thought it was the two of them. I guess it's Blanks by default, but I think he's like, if you give me like a win percentage for him, I'm probably going under that, whatever you're saying almost.
I can't believe I'm going to say this, but because they're moving up to 10K, this might be Nico Young's race.
I was wondering, because neither of us are super confident in his ability to really win an NCAA title, but he's looked good, and in the absence of anybody else looking terrific, this could be it.
I mean, he's been great. Man, it's so hard. I mean, because like the way that I would feel like if Young had to win this race, it would also play into Kaleda's strengths. I don't. Oh man, I have no idea. I sincerely don't have a clue.
I honestly think Robinson might be my pick at the moment.
Well, I think it depends on how the race plays out.
Yeah.
You think you're gonna have Robinson as your pick?
I don't know. I'm workshopping that because I'm just wondering how this race is going to play out. So, and I know after talking with Robinson like preseason, I think one of his big regrets from last year was not going with that group.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I think he's going to put himself in it. Whether or not they run the kick out of him, I don't know. I think that's the calculus you have to decide, because I would imagine like Young and Bosley are going to push. Kaleda will be there. Blank should be there. Robinson, some of the Oklahoma State guys you would imagine will probably be there. But I think Robinson is going to at least be there with a K to go. And I struggle to bet against him if that's the case.
Okay. Yeah, I can't remember the last time this field was this wide open.
I know. This is crazy. I mean, last year we pretty much called it, like who the contenders were. I mean, this year you really could pick from anybody.
Man. Okay. All right, let's move on. Let's go to what is it? What's the next one?
Let's go to Podium Contenders, and we'll stick on the men's side. So we've already talked about Oklahoma State and AU. Feel like those two are locks. I think we're talking about a bigger group though for these next few spots. I think BYU is in there. Wisconsin deserves to be in there. California Baptist, I think, still deserves to be in there despite their shaky performance at the West Regional. And then it's like maybe Arkansas, maybe North Carolina. There's like that four. I don't feel that great about a lot of these teams, but they just because of that, I think it opens the door for a lot of teams to like surprise their way into a 4th place finish.
Yeah, I think the podium favorites are clearly NAU, Oklahoma State, BYU, Wisconsin.
Agreed.
Significant drop, and then it's CBU, North Carolina, Syracuse, Arkansas. Those are the next 4 teams where I said you could convince me that any of those next 4 teams in that tier could be a podium team. I'm not favoring them to do so, but I wouldn't be totally stunned if they were on the podium.
Yeah. Yeah, I think Wisconsin has maybe more firepower this year than BYU. BYU's been very consistent. Wisconsin has been inconsistent, but more just as a product of they're not running all their guys every week. And then North Carolina, you got to like their firepower of Wolf, Phillip, and Strand. We've talked about Gebhardt as being an X factor. If he puts together another good race, they could certainly be right there. CBU has some guys that you feel good about being All-Americans as well if they have their normal days. Syracuse, I'm not really sure if I'm there yet with them. They've run exceptionally well. I just almost need them to prove it to me at an NCAA championship. And then Arkansas, they've been fantastic, but again, I have the same question marks about they just haven't run well in a big meet yet, because they haven't really been in a big meet yet.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's at least avenues. Like I can see, and I can like specifically point out avenues for all those teams. And so for me, that's why I would say they are contenders, but they're certainly not favorites. I think the podium is very clearly NAU, Oklahoma State, BYU, Wisconsin.
Agreed. On the women's side, we have NAU and NC State locks. And then, I mean, again, I think this is a little bit of an open discussion. You have teams like BYU, Georgetown, Florida, we didn't mention, no Amelia Mazzadowney this past week. There's not a team more reliant on like one particular runner, I think, than Florida is in her. Like, if they want to reach their ceiling, they got to have her back and running well. And if they don't,
some of their back end runners haven't been amazing as of late either. So
no, I mean, yeah, Thorner and Wilson weren't fantastic this past week either. And then do you have how many other teams do you have? I mean, I just listed off 5.
I think there's 7 teams in the podium conversation. So it's NAU, NC State, it's Georgetown, BYU, Florida, Stanford, and Oklahoma State.
Okay. Yeah, I would agree with that. And Stanford, again, they just need, if they can get, you got to like what you're seeing about with Bunnage and Jenks, if they can just get one other person to kind of bridge that gap between number 2 and number 4, then I think they're in great shape. And then Oklahoma State with firepower of Jeff Curry and Taylor Rowe, Molly Bourne looking good as well. They could certainly, if they put it all together, be right there. I mean, who do you feel more confident in qualify or getting the podium spot? Florida or Oklahoma State?
Oh, good question. Such a good question.
I think it's more likely that Florida makes the podium, but more likely that Oklahoma State beats them. Those are contradictory statements, it would seem, but I think that's true.
I get what you're saying. I think I would go Florida, just because I know that they have known quantities, and we're making assumptions that they're all going to run at their best.
Right.
There have certainly not been those moments, but with Oklahoma State, I get to 3 runners and then there's a drop.
Yep.
And it's like, okay, well, are they really that much better than what the back end of Florida State could have? So I just don't see, like, Asakol, Valby, and who else? Mazzadowney, probably, assuming that she's going to run. Mm-hmm. That's just as good as what Oklahoma State can field.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's go and then let's move on and stay on the women's side. We're going to go talk about our sleeper team. So I think, just to make sure we're on the same page here and for our audience, sleeper is someone who is maybe outside our like top 15-ish kind of what we've thought all year, and can just exceed expectations or exceed most people's expectations at NCAA.
Yeah. Do you have the updated list from Mara and Finn?
I don't, but I think I can probably figure out my way around that.
I was gonna say, so I can share that with you just so you have it just in case.
Okay, yeah, let me take a look.
I'll drop that in there. But yeah, so I'll go ahead while you're taking a look at that just in case because that's a new order and I don't know how much that applies. There we go. Sleeper team from the women's side.
Oh, I this is easy for me. I was just making sure that this team wasn't in our top 15.
Yeah. Okay. I think we're both on the same page here then. Let's do the 1, 2, 3 countdown.
Yeah, there you go.
Wyatt, just edit it together if it doesn't sync. Okay. All right. Ready? Here we go. 1, 2, 3. Tennessee.
Furman. Oh,
Okay. Interesting. Very interesting. Why Furman?
I think Tennessee's a great pick. Just first off, Furman. I think I said what, like right after my Europe trip that I was like top 15, like lock.
You did. Mm-hmm.
And they've looked great. I mean, their regional performance was very, very good. I think they're going to finish top 15 at the very worst at this point. I think they're going to be closer to top 10 than 15th would be my guess. I just like the way they're running as a pack. And at an NCAA championships, when you're talking about teams that are finishing anywhere from like 8th to 16th, having low stick is helpful. But really the most important thing is not having a horrible scorer in your 4th and 5th spots. Like if you can just lower your point, like, and just have a solid group, like if they can have a solid group from like 80th to 120th, they're going to finish in the top 15 and quite comfortably. And I just feel pretty comfortable with them doing that.
Yeah, they have options. Like they have a lot of options and they're all experienced and they're proven. And Bethany Graham could still maybe come back possibly. I think we thought like she had said like she was going to come back and she still hasn't been unless I'm missing something. Did she come back?
I don't think so. Let me
I don't think so either. So, but we'll double check here. I'll make sure. No, so I don't see it. But so just the fact that she could makes me high on this team. And so
yeah,
I think that's fair. For me, it's Tennessee just because they've been so good as of late. Like they have been getting a little bit better, a little bit better, a little bit better. Like they're on a hot streak and they are peaking perfectly. The youth scares me. That same youth, however, is what actually gets me really excited. Yeah. It's because they have all this youth-based upside and they're still improving, right? Like Ashley Jones, Jillian Kendallino, Jessie Secor, and Rachel Sutliff went 7, 10, 11, 12 at the regional meet. And then they had their 5th scorer back in Caroline Lowry in 21st place, Kayla Galar in 23rd. I think Galar can be better in the future. You know, I just really like this team just because they've been getting better and better and better and better. And yes, I know that Florida was probably not kind of going, you know, all out maybe. And yes, I know they didn't have Mazza Downey. Mm-hmm. But to beat them still by 18 points, again, I know I'm not saying that Florida is, you know, that they were beating a stacked Florida team, but the point stands.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's go to the men's side. Do you have a sleeper? I think I have one right off the bat.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
We haven't finalized our ranking orders, but I don't think this team would be disqualified by those standards. I think Iowa State is like, again, they haven't really all put it together. Regionals was good, but they're going up against really no competition. They just have guys that you wouldn't be stunned to see be All-Americans. And it's there's enough of those guys that you feel like, hey, maybe they end up getting 2 All-Americans and they have just enough depth, and all of a sudden they're 12th or like 10th. Like, and it would be, I certainly am probably not predicting them there, but I think they have a higher end capabilities than a lot of these other teams in that like 15th to 25 like group of our rankings.
And I think that's fair. Yeah, I mean, they've just been, I'll say this, they've just been one of those unlucky teams where the way that we stagger our rankings, it just hasn't benefited them very well. But I agree, like they're on paper a good team when they all race well at the same time. It's, again, just one of those stories of like, Well, no, they still just have to have their best day. No, don't worry, they still just have to have their best day, and that's kind of what this is. And so I've kind of lost a little bit of hope, but like the fact that they could be so much better is certainly, I think, a fair pick.
Yeah.
Ben, I picked them in 2019.
Oh boy, here we go.
And they made me look awesome. So I'm going back to them. Give me Michigan.
I looked at them.
Give me Michigan, man. This is a team that you have two great lead scorers in Tom Brady and Nick Foster. Foster hasn't really been at his best, but I believe he can be better. I believe Brady at his best is a low stick, is an All-American. He's been great in his last two races. I believe he gets better to the 10K distance. Owen McKenzie was a very, very solid and underrated key scorer for Duke last year. Recently, he has been so much better. And then they have guys like Luke Venhuizen, I'm saying that name. Caleb Jarima has been a lot better. We haven't seen certain other guys. Like I think Zach Stewart can be better. Nathan Lopez, a freshman's in there. You know, there's some back end iffiness there. But I think they're just solid across the board. I'm not nearly as concerned about their depth as I am maybe like a few other teams in the second half of our rankings. I said it back then, and I'll say it this time. Michigan is the sleeper team on the men's side.
I like it. Yeah, they know what to do at NCAAs. They're well coached. They're well prepared. They got veterans who can lead this team well. And you have the potential firepower up front. I think that's a rare combination for teams maybe in the back half of our rankings. Let's go to the next category, and we'll stick on the men's side. Who is the biggest unknown team? Like who do we just like not know what they're gonna do?
It's got to be Colorado, right?
Yes, it is the easiest answer out of all these categories. We briefly touched on it. They have been so inconsistent. I mean, really, they've only shown us one truly good flash. So taking them at their word for their other races, I think might be the better move. But again, you're talking about a great program, a great coach. Like they don't have a lot of veterans necessarily there, but you feel like they're going to be well prepared for an NCAA championships. They're probably going to run a conservative style where they move up, and that is going to lead to probably maybe a stronger finish than what you might imagine.
Yeah,
I could all be wrong. I like everything I could have said might not come true.
Yeah, I mean, they could be 10th, and we'd be like, yep, sounds about right. They could be 28th. We'd be like, also sounds about right. And I think Florida State's kind of in that same conversation.
Sure.
Like Florida State, it's more just because it's not that we don't know what they will do. It's more so we just don't know which version of them that we're getting, right? Because they have to have certain men hit great days on the same time. And if they do, then they're a top half team. If not, I don't know if they're going to crack the top 25. They're great. Like as they showed in the South region, when everyone's looking good, they're hard to stop. They're hard to take down. Like even a good Alabama team that was running well couldn't take down the Seminoles. And then I'd probably throw Portland in there as well, just because we know that on paper, this Portland team is talented. They're great. It's not like the personnel has changed dramatically all that much. But of course, they struggled this season a lot, and they've only really had one great race where everyone did look like they've been at their best, or at least most of those guys have. So it's like, well, is this the new expectation for Portland? Like, is this what we should expect going forward? Is the 10K distance just different for them? You know, are all the struggles behind them, or should we really just not be so quick to just brush off what has been an admittedly really tough season for them?
Yeah, I mean, they were another team that when we were talking earlier about regional reactions, you look at their lineup and you're like, you know what? They like these guys finishing where they did. Not all that. If you hadn't seen them race all year this year and just saw the names, like Matt Strangio had a great track season last year. I mean, finishing second's a little high, but like not shocking. Jonas Gerson, like finishing or like running well, not super surprising. He has the talent. So yeah, I think that's a good pick. On the women's side, I'm having a hard time here picking one. Do you have a team? Was it Colorado again?
I was wondering if it was going to be Colorado. To me, I think it's Lipscomb. I really like Lipscomb. I really want to like them. I think their lineup structure is conducive to avoiding a poor day.
Sure.
But they were just 5th in that region.
Yeah.
And it wasn't great. and they're still relatively inexperienced for this kind of stage. They don't really have like a home run hitter. Like Lydia Miller's great, and they've had a few others step up this season that I'm just not even thinking of. More specifically, who was that? Kiara Carter. Kiara Carter just had a phenomenal day at South Regionals, but I don't know. I could see them having like another Nutty Cone performance where they're on the fringes of the top 10, or it's just like, hey, inexperience caught up with you. You're out of the top 25.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, that's fair. It's hard. I think we've seen this time and time again, that the year where you really break out from not being necessarily nationally relevant to being nationally relevant, it's an extraordinary achievement to be able to actually have a good NCAA performance.
Yep.
Like that is very, very hard. So they have the talent on paper. They have the talent based off of their races. Can they follow that up with another good performance at NCAAs?
Great. Okay. Who's your team?
I think it's Colorado. Like I honestly think it is. And that's honestly, it's more of a product of just like, the women are running on this roster in this lineup that you just didn't imagine running in this lineup when we started our preseason rankings even. So Samory Dishon just hasn't been to that level. I still could see her maybe surprise us at NCAA. And maybe they get back someone that we're not expecting, like, and runs their one and only race at NCAAs. Who knows? Like I would bank on that not happening, but that possibility is still there.
100%. I mean, it's like, well, they could run Bailey Hertenstein, and they could run Natalie Cook, and they could do this, and they could do that. And I'm like, and Samory Dishon could be an All-American, and maybe Covert and Baran have their best days possible.
Right.
And Balaga is, just as good as advertised and has the race of her life. And all of a sudden, they're a podium team. And it's like, well, sure, that could happen, but like, it's extremely unlikely at this point that it's not. And every other result that they've given us has been like, all right, who knows?
It would be the most Starlipper thing to only run at her one race at Nationals and be like All-American, like just come out of nowhere.
I mean, listen, whatever works. And like, however you get there, I mean, good, that'd be cool. But otherwise, I think you're right. I think this is the lineup. It's a good lineup. It's not amazing. We'll see how the back end does. We'll see how Balaga's inexperience goes. But otherwise, yeah, I think it's probably Colorado.
Next category, and we'll stick on the women's side, a team that you irrationally like, that for whatever reason, maybe there's one performance or one runner that just, even though there is an overwhelming amount of evidence, you just really feel good about going to nationals.
I think I'm going to go with Boston College.
Okay.
Just kind of like him. I just like Tavella has been really solid. I think a lot of these women are experienced. Like the top 5 has been steady this season, and they're not going to blow you away. But if they just don't blow you away and just get the job done, then they're going to surpass teams that'll just implode on their own. And they now have some spark. They had, they really caught our attention at ACCs when they had a decent race there. Then they were great at Northeast Regional Meet, and now I'm like, man, Watson's their coach. What happens from there? So I'll go Boston College.
Okay, yeah, I mean, the momentum's certainly with them. They're a team that you feel like is just on a roll, and it's hard to bet against them. For me, and I think I hinted at this maybe a few weeks ago, I am just really high in Utah Valley. Sure, they didn't finish. They weren't great at regionals. They ended up finishing 5th. But they were only 5 points behind Colorado, 16 behind Utah. It's not. They did what they needed to do. Yeah. And I think that coming after just the fantastic race and like the high that they had at WAC beating CBU, I think that's actually pretty impressive for them to be able to just like have a business like performance at regionals. I'm putting way. I'm already admitting this. I'm putting way too much stock in their conference championship win, but that kind of performance just leads me to believe that they have a top end potential that I really am excited about seeing. And I mean, again, they might not have like a ton of firepower up front, but I like their depth, and I think they're going to at least be a solidly, and I said this before, a solidly top 15 team.
Yeah. Yeah, and the thing is, like, I was like looking at teams to pick, and I saw them. I go, oh well, Ben's gonna pick them, so I'm not going to. And then I moved on. And it just seems fitting for you to take. And then I kind of forgot that you were going to choose them anyways. On the men's side, who are you picking there? I don't think there's a lot of great.
I'm going with Wake Forest. I've kind of hinted at it a few times. Rocky Hansen coming, if he can come back, they have, the ship has not sunk without him. And I think that's the best thing you can say. They qualified for nationals. They have put in respectable performances at conference and at regionals, and they're getting back arguably a top 5 runner this year. Like it wouldn't have been crazy for us to say, like, when he was running at his best after Nuttycombe, that he could have been in that group of 6 or 7 or 8 guys that we were talking about being individual like title contenders. Not he's certainly wouldn't have been a favorite, but you would have put him in that group. And they are just they have shown a little bit more firepower up front. Who was it that just stepped up for them at regionals? Luke T. Walt just ran well. Like, he's a guy that could absolutely be an All-American, and they don't have a ton of like depth, but they have enough guys that have shown flashes where you feel like they could put 5 really good scorers ahead.
I love Princeton.
Yes, that's on brand for you too.
Love Princeton. Just such a great team. And there's everything. It's not just that they won the Mid-Atlantic title. It's like, whatever, like, yeah, I'm not really putting much stock into that. But Nicholas Benenson has been awesome. He looks like he's a true low stick. Jarrett Kirk has been a very underrated, solid stability middle lineup scorer. Connor Nisbet has continued to be a great high impact scorer. Now that Benenson has now kind of taken over, he has been probably one of the best middle lineup scorers in the country. Anthony Monty just came back and is now being more competitive. He got 11th at Mid-Atlantics. Dan O'Brien has been great. They've got depth out of the wazoo. I just really, really, really like Princeton. I think they're extremely safe, and I would even, go as far as to say that they'll finish like 7th or 8th at the national meet.
Whoa, yeah. I mean, I think if outside the top 10, I think they're like the most, or like the safest pick to finish in the top 15. Like, they're just solid. Like, and if they can actually have a low stick, which they just have, that has been their Achilles heel for years. Yeah. If they can actually have someone in the top 50 at nationals, that just, it improves their ceiling significantly.
Agreed. Ben, I think we're all set here.
That was great. That was super smooth.
Yeah, it was. Nice job to us. Nice. And, well, yeah, that was great. I'm upset that we will not be having you for next week.
Me too.
But thank you, everyone, for listening. If you're listening, go on the site. We're about to have predictions up. This is probably going to go out on Wednesday. We'll probably have predictions either Wednesday or Thursday. We'll have updated D1 rankings. We'll have previews for D1, D2, D3 nationals. We're going to have people on site at, I hope, all the national meets. So that's the goal, knock on wood. Still planning a few things out there. And, of course, we will react to everything. We'll do end of season awards after it all. So I'm looking forward to it. So, Ben, did I miss anything?
No, this is championship season. We're here. It's super exciting. We are excited to be able to preview this with you and react following. So, like Garrett said, keep your eye on the site. Lots to come. But until, I guess, 2 weeks for me, I'll talk to you, Garrett.
I'll talk to you.